The year is 1996. Coffee is just coffee. Cheap, bitter, poured from glass pots in break rooms and gas stations. No one lingers. No one asks where the beans came from. You drink it, you move on. Then, almost overnight, it changes. Velvet chairs, jazz in the background. A barista calls your name for a drink that now costs $6. Why did that feel so good? What exactly are we paying for? And how did Starbucks make billions without ever really selling you coffee? This is the story behind the coffee illusion. But to understand how Starbucks pulled off the illusion, we need to rewind to a time when the coffee industry wasn't just boring, it was untouchable. No branding, no romance, no identity, just a bitter drink people tolerated. At the time, the coffee market was already saturated. Brands like Folgers, Maxwell House, and Nescafe dominated supermarket shelves, but no one felt anything for them. They sold on quantity, not quality. Convenience, not connection. Even the big chains, Dunkin', McDonald's, weren't really in the coffee business. They were in the breakfast business. Coffee was just a sidekick. And the idea of a coffee shop as a place to relax, that was foreign, literally. It existed in Europe, but in America, it hadn't arrived. Most people didn't even know what a barista was, or what a cappuccino should taste like. The industry wasn't broken, it just wasn't human. That's why no one tried to fix it. And that's exactly why Starbucks could. Because while everyone else competed over the same boring product, Starbucks started building something else. A feeling. An identity. A third place. And to pull that off, they needed a visionary. Someone who didn't just see coffee, but saw what coffee could become. Howard Schultz didn't invent coffee culture, but he saw it, and then sold it back to us. In 1983, Schultz visited Milan and had what he calls a transformative moment. It wasn't the espresso that changed him, it was the vibe. The baristas knew the customers. The counters were clean, the conversations were real. People didn't rush in and out. They paused, connected, lingered. Coffee shops weren't pit stops. They were part of the rhythm of life. That rhythm didn't exist in the US, but Schultz believed it could. And when he returned to Seattle, he pitched this vision to the owners of Starbucks, which at the time was just a modest roaster that sold beans and machines. No drinks, no seating. He told them, let's turn this into a real cafe, a place where people want to stay, sip, socialize. They weren't convinced. So Schultz walked, and with the help of investors, he started his own cafe called Il Giornale. He filled it with Italian music, warm lighting, and offered handcrafted drinks served in real cups, not disposable ones. People responded. It felt like Europe, but local, familiar but fresh. Starbucks eventually came around. In 1987, Schultz bought the company and began scaling his idea. Not just a cafe, but a lifestyle brand wrapped around coffee. Most brands sell what they have. Starbucks sold something you didn't even realize you wanted. To understand how they pulled that off, we need to dissect the strategy behind the feeling. What Schultz understood early on was this. Americans weren't craving better coffee. They were craving better moments. And Starbucks promised to deliver those moments one cup at a time. What happened next was marketing alchemy. Starbucks didn't spend big on TV spots or jingles. There were no flashy launch events, no celebrity endorsements. Instead, they built something smarter, more durable. They crafted a world. From the second you stepped into a store, everything was choreographed. The smell of ground beans, the low hum of conversation, the soft playlist looping in the background. It wasn't about the product, it was about the place. And the details? Genius. They didn't call it small, medium, or large. They called it tall, grande, venti. The words didn't just confuse, they elevated. You had to learn the language to belong. That alone made it feel premium. You weren't just ordering coffee, you were joining a club. And personalization? That was the cherry on top. Writing your name on the cup turned an everyday purchase into a tiny moment of recognition, even when they got it hilariously wrong. But the most powerful move Starbucks made was this. They turned their stores into what sociologists call the third place. Not home, not work, but somewhere in between. Somewhere you choose to be. And that choice, paired with comfy seating, Wi-Fi, and a consistent vibe, meant that people didn't just drop by Starbucks. They stayed, they studied, they held meetings, they went on first dates. Starbucks became a set piece in the movie of your life. And the price, that was part of the script too. Charging more didn't push people away, it pulled them in. Because when something feels more expensive, it feels more valuable. Starbucks didn't sell drinks, it sold self-worth. And it worked. Starbucks didn't explode onto the scene with loud billboards or viral campaigns. Instead, it crept in, store by store, neighborhood by neighborhood. Schultz and his team didn't just find locations, they scouted communities. Their early focus was on affluent urban areas, places where consumers were already primed to spend on experiences. Think New York's Upper West Side, LA's Melrose, or downtown Seattle. They placed stores near bookshops, theaters, and universities. Not by accident, but because those locations came with built-in tastemakers, creative types, intellectuals, students, people who other people watched. If the cool kids were sipping Starbucks, others would follow, and they did. Without shouting, Starbucks became part of the cultural fabric. The stores were designed to blend in and stand out at the same time. Earth tones, natural wood, local art, it all felt intentional. Familiar, yet a little elevated. And unlike fast food chains that slap the same decor everywhere, Starbucks allowed for localized touches, making each store feel like a part of the neighborhood it served. Word of mouth did the rest. People talked about my Starbucks, not the brand, their version of the brand. That's a rare kind of customer relationship. And it's why, by the late 2000s, the Green Mermaid wasn't just a logo, it was a lifestyle badge. You ever wonder why a cup of Starbucks feels different? Why are people willing to shell out triple the price of a regular coffee and still smile while doing it? It's not about the beans. It's not even really about the taste. Every detail, from the playlist to the color palette, was designed to make you feel comfortable, seen, and important. So what made it all stick? Now it's time to look at the psychology that made it all feel so good. Starbucks tapped into something deeply human, the craving for routine and reassurance. In a busy world, their stores became anchors. Same music, same smell, same menu, whether you were in Tokyo or Toronto. That consistency built trust. And once trust was there, loyalty followed. But Starbucks didn't stop at comfort. They layered in status. Holding a Starbucks cup, especially in the early days, was a quiet flex. It signaled you belonged to a more refined crowd, one that appreciated small indulgences. You weren't just drinking coffee, you were practicing self-care. You were part of the in-group. This status wasn't loud. It was coded into the experience, from the custom drink orders to the barista calling your name. And here's where behavioral economics kicks in. Starbucks introduced limited-time drinks. The pumpkin spice latte, the caramel brulee, those red holiday cups. They weren't just seasonal, they were engineered scarcity, and people loved it. They turned a regular purchase into a limited-time ritual, creating urgency and anticipation. Then came personalization. You could customize everything: milk type, syrup level, cup size, foam amount, and that made your order feel like yours. A reflection of your taste, your mood, your identity. When brands give you control, you give them commitment. All of this layered psychology didn't just convince people to buy more coffee, it convinced them that $6 was worth it. Because what they were really buying wasn't a drink, it was a feeling. And feelings, when marketed right, have no price ceiling. So how did all this strategy translate into actual numbers? Let's talk about metrics. As of 2024, Starbucks operates more than 40,000 stores across the globe. That's one store for every 200,000 people on Earth. Think about that for a second. What started as a little Seattle shop is now one of the most recognizable brands on the planet, alongside names like McDonald's, Nike, and Apple. Annual revenue? Over $36 billion. That's not a typo. And it's not just from coffee. Starbucks makes serious money through branded products. Bottled drinks, grocery store items, licensed cafes in airports and hotels. The brand became bigger than its core offering. It became a platform. Their loyalty program is one of the most successful in retail history. Starbucks Rewards has tens of millions of active users. It doesn't just incentivize repeat visits, it gamifies them. Stars, tiers, bonus offers. It keeps customers engaged, coming back and spending more. It's not a coffee habit anymore. It's a system. And then there's the valuation. Starbucks is one of the most valuable restaurant brands in the world. It's been in the top 5 for years, often outranking traditional food giants despite selling one main item. How? Because it's not competing on food, it's competing on experience. That's what makes the numbers sing. But what's even more impressive than the financials is the influence. Starbucks didn't just dominate the market, it changed the market. Competitors copied the look, the feel, even the lingo. Cafes that once sold regular lattes started offering ventis. Baristas everywhere started calling out names. Starbucks didn't follow trends, it set them. And it did it while breaking every conventional rule. But of course, not all that glitters is green and white. Behind the scenes, Starbucks has faced its share of backlash. Because once you become the face of an industry, you also become its biggest target. Labor issues have followed the company for years. Despite its progressive image, Starbucks has clashed with employees over unionization efforts, especially in the US. Several high-profile union campaigns brought attention to internal tensions, with workers citing inconsistent scheduling, wage concerns, and pressure to meet unrealistic performance goals. For a brand that built its identity on warmth and care, those stories hit hard. There's also the question of environmental responsibility. Starbucks uses billions of single-use cups each year. And while the company has introduced recycling initiatives and reusable cup programs, critics say the efforts haven't been aggressive enough for a brand of its scale. Then there's the cultural critique. Some say Starbucks played a role in gentrification. When a store opens in a neighborhood, rents often go up, independent cafes struggle, the area starts to change. The brand that once felt local everywhere began to feel like a symbol of sameness, mass-produced authenticity, and saturation became a real issue. In the 2010s, Starbucks faced what Schultz himself called brand dilution. Too many stores, too fast. Some areas had multiple locations on the same block. The intimacy was slipping. The vibe started to feel like fast food with mood lighting. But here's what's remarkable. Starbucks responded. The company began closing underperforming stores, redesigning spaces, doubling down on sustainability, and testing new formats like reserve bars and community cafes. They listened, adjusted, and tried to recapture the magic in it. Because here's the truth. Starbucks didn't just build a brand, it built a relationship. And like any long-term relationship, it faced challenges. but it also fought to keep the connection alive. So, how did Starbucks turn a $1 habit into a $5 ritual? It wasn't just branding, it was behavioral design. Here are 5 lessons every entrepreneur should steal from Starbucks. Lesson 1. Perception is everything. Starbucks didn't find better beans. It created better meaning. It made coffee feel like a personal ritual, not a generic purchase. That shift in perception is what gave it pricing power and brand love. Lesson 2. Product quality matters less than experience quality. You can't always remember what your drink tasted like, but you remember the vibe, the mood, the moment. Starbucks understood that feelings are more memorable than flavors. Lesson 3. Emotion drives loyalty. When a brand becomes your routine, your comfort zone, it earns trust. And trust is stickier than any marketing campaign. Lesson 4. Branding can reshape culture. Starbucks didn't just win the coffee category. It changed how we think about cafes. It made grabbing a coffee a social event, a work meeting, even a date. Lesson 5. Growth isn't the goal. Sustainable growth is. When Starbucks grew too fast, it stumbled. But when it listened, adapted, and evolved, it reminded the world why it mattered in the first place. Here's the final insight. Starbucks didn't sell a drink. It sold a daily destination. It made you feel like your time, your name, your preferences all mattered. It built identity into every order. And for millions of people, it turned caffeine into connection. That's not a marketing trick. That's strategy with soul. If this breakdown gave you a new way to think about branding, hit that like button and subscribe to Secret Behind the Brand. And tell me in the comments, what brand strategy should we decode next? Because great marketing doesn't just sell products, it reshapes perception.